Hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. My name is Phil. Joining me as usual, I've got my co-host and partner in crime, Rohan. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
And joining us from the US is Will. Welcome.
Hello.
This episode is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabu Casa. Easily access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that supports the Home Assistant and ESP home projects. Configuration is done by the user interface, so there's no fiddling with router settings, SSL certs, or any other YAML.
Rohan, it has been quite a while since we've done one of these, but today we are doing a spotlight episode, and I think
That's
it's
right.
a pretty good episode to do one on. Will's reached out to us on feedback@hasspodcast.io, letting us know, what something really cool he's using Home Assistant with. So, Will, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us whereabouts in the US you are and what you're doing with Home Assistant.
So I'm Will. I'm a professor at Drexel University College of Medicine, and I use Home Assistant to track the COVID pandemic here at Drexel using a really cool sequencing machine.
Yeah, sounds pretty fancy. So basically, you're using Home Assistant in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. So I guess I am not a scientist, I have no idea what sequencing means. What is sequencing and what does that mean, right? Like, are you creating vaccines with this or are you becoming Superman somehow?
It's closer to these new variants that you hear about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tracking those, their
Right.
emergence, their prevalence throughout the community, and trying to predict which new ones may be coming.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm guessing, so you've got like machines in your office that, you can run, samples, when people go get a COVID test and you track those?
Yeah. So the process from nose to Home Assistant, right, is person thinks they have COVID, they come in, we shove a swab up their nose, and on that will be some virus, right? And then the sample comes back to us. We do a rapid test to just check, is there virus there, so we can tell the patient.
Yeah.
And then as sort of epidemiologists or as people who are sort of tracking what's happening, what we also want to know is, you hear about these Delta variants or Lambda variants or the UK variant.
Kappa, everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. And at the moment, we don't really think those matter too much to the patient themselves. One is not any more dangerous than any of the others.
Right.
But we do like to know, are we getting new infections coming in, or are we having the same infection over and over?
Right. So is it mutating or not, essentially?
Right, exactly. Okay. Or have we gotten the new mutation, or are we still dealing with the old one?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because that may help us understand whether our student population that's coming in, whether we're effectively protecting them from spread within the community, or is it new things coming from outside the community that are infecting everyone?
Right. Okay, that's actually pretty interesting. So how has the study been going? Like, as in, have you found other variants? Anything? Not to freak people out, but whatever you can say, right?
Yeah. So what I really do, I'm not really on the discovery side. I always see myself as like a surveiller, right? I sort of think about what is happening with the population, and for example, at Drexel, as of today, as of my most recent samples, the Delta variant has not arrived here.
Interesting.
I have samples.
Interesting. Okay.
I have samples in the fridge from last week.
Yeah.
They may, for all I know. And
interesting. Okay.
As our student population comes back, right, that may we'll sort of just want to keep an eye on things so that we could perhaps catch an outbreak before it gets worse. Right.
Gotcha. Okay. So So you mentioned that you're doing this in the context of the community, not necessarily just the school itself, just like kind of the area.
For me, it's just the student population, because
Gotcha.
that's the samples that come in with. But people
Right.
use this technology in a public health setting on a larger scale as well.
Okay, so that's pretty cool then. So what are you doing with that and Home Assistant essentially?
So the thing we have to do to measure these variants, to understand which one it is we actually have to read the genome of those viruses.
Okay.
And there's a technology from a company called Oxford Nanopore. They make a tool called the MinION. It's a sequencer that's like fits in your hand, like literally it fits in your hand. It connects to a USB drive, like it's just a USB dongle.
Yeah.
And you can put, these genomes, after you've done some chemistry to them, you can put them in and it will actually read that DNA.
Wow.
And it's like a tool for engineers. So it's, what's the best way to describe this?
Like a scanner for DNA, essentially.
Yeah, a scanner. Yeah, that's not a bad description. It just reads it like a ticker tape.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
When Home Assistant, because it's just like a USB dongle, Home Assistant can interface with the same tools that it interfaces with. It runs a gRPC server.
Yeah.
That like tells you how many bases you've read so far, or how many bases you've read from each sample. And I can watch the machine as it goes. When I've read enough DNA, I can actually stop it and be done, right? And that can take 4 hours. But I may not know when it's going to be done before I start.
Right.
Home Assistant lets me monitor all of these things live and say, oh, sample 2, 3, 4, and 5, I've read enough of them. I pause it, and then I can save the rest of the reagents for that run, right? Making each one cheaper over time.
Okay.
Interesting. So, and can you like automate that in Home Assistant as well? Like when it gets to a certain level, like you could send you a notification or something?
That's exactly what it does now.
Awesome.
So the like stock tools that this thing ships with, you guess, you say how long do you want it to run for? 24 hours.
Yep.
And you set, and then you have to wait. It will run 24 hours, and then you might have to wait another day or two for it to like analyze the data. What I use Home Assistant to do is, as the run is going, every hour, it processes what it has.
Right.
Then another hour later, processes what it has, right?
Interesting.
And then when I have the answer, I can say, hey, I have the answer.
Right.
Stop collecting.
If you, let's say you said in the original stock standard system, you said, all right, run this for 24 hours. You would have to do it for a minimum of 24 hours and then wait another 24 hours to get the results back, for example.
Yep.
But now with Home Assistant, you're saying every hour check the result and process it for an hour. And then after that, all right, yes, I have enough data here to make an answer. Or if I don't, keep going for another hour until you've got to enough data there to say, yes, this is the answer I've got here.
Exactly.
Nice. So that must make like it a lot more efficient. Like in terms of, instead of it now being a test that takes 24 hours plus 24-hour like processing time, you could potentially turn something down to like 3 hours plus 3 hours, or 6 hour turnaround time.
And the like processing time, I can use Home Assistant to automate running as it goes.
Oh, nice.
So I don't have to wait to the end.
Right.
I can actually run it midway through.
Yeah.
And like I use Home Assistant in my home life. And I got this device And I was trying to figure out, how do I make a cron job to automate running this Python script?
Yeah.
And then how do I then make a notification to turn this off? And then I'm like, wait, I have Docker on this.
Yeah.
Why don't I just make a Home Assistant? And then, Home Assistant at work now.
Yeah. And so awesome. I've seen in some of the screenshots that you sent us, like you've actually got now you've got a dashboard as well inside Home Assistant, so you can monitor things in real time. But what sort of details do you have on the dashboard that makes sense to you?
So one of the chemistry tricks that we do when we run the DNA through this machine, we can run many samples at the same time by putting a short barcode on the beginning.
Okay.
Right? So as the DNA gets read, the first 12 base pairs tell it this strand belongs to sample 1.
Okay.
This strand belongs to sample 2. That way, when we put 12 of them in the machine, we can read 12 at once by splitting them on the back end into the right bucket. One of the complications of that is we have to put the same amount of each in the machine. Otherwise, it will read way more from barcode 1 than from barcode 2 if there's way more of DNA strands. And with Home Assistant, because it monitors as it goes, I can see how many I've gathered from each of those barcodes. And if there's some that are lagging behind, I can actually go in the back, mix up the ones that are lagging behind, pause the machine, add it, start the machine, and then fix the problem that I made.
That's
interesting.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, because on the screenshot, I noticed there was some stuff where you're you kind of said this is a bad run, right? Of whatever. So I guess that was kind of not really where it was supposed to be.
Exactly. It helps me sort of diagnose these problems in the first hour when I can still fix them.
Rather than waiting 24.
Instead of, 2 days later. And then being like, oh, I have 1,000 times more of these 2 samples than the others. And so now I can't get the answer for those other 2 samples because I didn't actually read enough of them. And so I have to do those 2 again, right? Which is another 2 days.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm really surprised that, it kind of came down to you being like, how's a better way of doing this? And let's run it through Home Assistant. Let's do that kind of thing. You would have thought a manufacturer would have been like, hey, this is something that we can actually do pretty efficiently built in our software or whatever, instead of you having to go through and do all of this extra stuff, right?
I think it's a lot like we see in the Home Assistant space, that you make a product that works well for most people, and most people don't want to do the crazy things. Most people are willing to wait 2 days.
Yeah.
But, for people who want to do something different, at least they offer an API that's documented.
Which is actually wicked. Yeah.
You can actually play with. They can actually do everything the machine that their UI can do, you can do through this API.
That's really cool. Okay. So it's it's again, we talk about this all the time on the show, just, about people opening it up and kind of giving you that ability to do whatever. But it's really cool that in the professional, medical world, typically, you hear medical and you automatically slap a label of this is going to be just $10 billion and it's gonna, it works the way they say it works kind of thing, right? That's typically the notion you get. So,
and there are those things. So I bought a MinION sequencer. It was $1,000.
Yeah.
So, cheaper than some stuff we buy for our Home Assistant.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right. And I got that. We have in our sequencing center, we have maybe 4 other pieces of technology that are different, but try to do the same thing, that are more like that. They're more, you buy an Illumina sequencer.
Yeah.
It's a box. Everything is inside the box. There's only one way you put your sample in.
Yeah.
But there's always somebody you can call on tech support.
Yeah.
You spent $200,000 on this machine. There's somebody who picks up the phone.
Yeah.
So there is sort of that space too. Probably because I'm a Home Assistant person, I gravitated to the one that was a little bit more like, you just plug it in. And
cheap and DIY. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's amazing. It's
It's become the way that we do our rapid tracking here at Drexel. That this $1,000 with Home Assistant type thing is how we track. It is the only thing that's really fast enough to sort of track things. Our other technologies are much better for when you have 500 samples and you want to run them all at once.
Yeah.
And they're cheaper that way in the sort of economies of scale.
Yeah.
But you want rapid things, you got to do something else.
Yeah.
So I guess, you're obviously, doing this testing to find out, where the variants are. So how often are students for these test results that students have to give in when they come back to the university, or is it just, as someone thinks they've got cold and flu symptoms, they go get a test and it comes to your lab to see what's going on in the community?
So here at Drexel right now, the rules change by email.
Depending on which way the wind's blowing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Unvaccinated individuals are getting surveillance testing, I think, every 2 weeks. And then students or members of the community come in if they have symptoms and can get a test.
Yep, that makes sense.
So we get, at the moment, maybe 200-ish tests every couple of weeks.
Yep.
And maybe 8% positivity, 4 to 8%, depending on the day.
And the samples that you run specifically through Home Assistant, do you know that they are positive for COVID-19?
Yes.
Yep. So you're only interested in the positive results to do the sequencing on? Because
we do a rapid test ahead of this.
Yep.
Because if only 8% of them are positive, then if I ran this protocol on any random sample, out of 12, I might get 1, and that's not really going to be all that. And that's very expensive relative to the rapid test, which is cheap.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and you're tying up the machine for a while, right? Or your box for a little bit. So
So you've got notifications done through Home Assistant now. What other, have you got any other automations or that can be done through Home Assistant? Can Home Assistant, take out and put in the next, disk for you to start, testing, I guess?
That would be cool. I don't have a robot attached yet, but perhaps.
Okay. As long as it's on the future plan, as long as it's on the roadmap, that's right. That.
Right now, Will is a robot.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, exactly. So mostly it can pause the run, is the most thing I've been able to get it to do.
So it can do that automatically?
Yeah, because there are a couple of obvious failure modes that the machine has that you can, with Home Assistant, very easily sort of spot. As the DNA gets read through these pores, it takes energy. They call it fuel. If you start running out, it slows down. And the server actually sends out a measure of how fast everything is going through these pores. When it drops below a particular level, I just tell Home Assistant to pause the machine and send me a notification through the app.
Yep. Yeah.
And then I can go in and add a little bit more juice.
Yep.
And then hit the unpause button, and then it keeps going, right? Instead of continually running lower and lower and lower and getting slower and
longer
slower
and longer.
slower.
Yeah.
So you've just got a threshold there that says if past this point, if lower than this, then pause. And then
I think I took somebody's blueprint that was sensor above or below a value, send notification, actionable notification. I just one to the other, and it went.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome. I love that you use a blueprint for it too.
It's there.
Yeah. Hey, why not?
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So have you set up anything like a remote connection so that you can, monitor how it's going, from home or wherever else you are?
So I just bought it a Nabu Casa account.
That's the way to go.
Nice.
Yeah, it was just easier.
Mm-hmm.
The server is behind our Drexel College of Medicine firewall.
Good luck getting a hole punched through that firewall, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't even want to ask. The easier thing was the secure way. So
yeah.
What are you doing, and why is it on one of our computers inside the? Exactly.
Yeah, open yourself up for a full audit. Yeah.
Do you want an alias so when we put this podcast out, they don't come knocking on your door?
No.
This is Bob. Yeah,
this is Bob. Yeah, I can totally imagine. How would you get in that such a secure environment, right? There's no way you would get a whole bunch of firewall.
We have a VPN that I use to place my home computer on their network through whatever secure tunnel they make. That I can use to access Home Assistant. I use to access all my other servers.
Mm-hmm.
But then once I log off, that disappears. Yep. So it was easier to just make a remote.
It works with the Home Assistant app on your phone, so you can get the push notifications. It's just you don't have to be connected to a VPN on your phone all the time to get those notifications.
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
And you can go start a test, go out for a coffee, whatever, come back and ding, it's done, right?
And it helps me start something and then not fiddle with it and watch the stock UI, which is not designed, not laid out in an optimal way for what I want to do. It doesn't quite have all the numbers that I need. So taking the data that the server makes and using Home Assistant templates to convert things was just easier. It was just easier than any other solution that I found.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. It's to me, again, this is we always say this, right? This is the kind of cool stuff with Home Assistant where you use it as a automation platform, essentially, right? Where you take this and do whatever you want with it, right? I mean, it's called Home Assistant, but obviously the power here is really around using it as an automation tool, just in general, rather than having to go in, like you said, set up cron jobs on a Linux machine and do this, do that, whatever. You've got this base platform that does this really well, right? It can interface with other stuff really well too. Like you said, it's just a USB device that you plug in, and off you go.
Yeah. So I had a question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the way I have managed to integrate it, I'll say that, is they have a Python API that I just wrote Python scripts that interface with their Python API, generates a JSON file, which I then have Home Assistant read through a command line sensor or whatever it is.
Yeah.
The command line sensor calls a Python script, which calls their API, which gives me a JSON, which I then grab into attributes.
Nice.
Are there any integrations that natively talk to gRPC servers? Because they offer the protobuf files. They offer all of the description of their API, but I can make Python scripts. That's about the extent of my skill at that level.
I'd be more inclined to say if what you've got is working, don't fix it, right?
Yeah,
I'm not gonna.
I haven't seen anything with gRPC in general, but I just did a quick homeassistant.io gRPC search, right? And it didn't come up anything, but Yeah, like I don't. Though protobuf might be.
Yeah, I did some
No.
basic Googling, but couldn't quite find anything, and wondered if you had seen
Well,
anything in your travels.
I'm sure if there will be someone that is listening to this podcast that will, so
Yeah.
we'll forward it on. Feedback at haspodcast.io if you want to help Will in that venture. But if it's just like a server on something, surely there must be like something that could integrate, and just push something over to Home Assistant via like a webhook or something, like a like either MQTT or something. Just create a little web server to.
I think there's some stuff. So in for me, work wise, right, in technology. So wireless controllers. Some of our wireless controllers use gRPC as a mechanism to send telemetry of what's your RF interference levels and whatever, right? So there is a way actually. So you can take all of that stuff, dump it into InfluxDB and Grafana. Right. There may be a little bit of work there in the middle that you need to do. I think maybe Telegraph can ingest gRPC. So, and so essentially what I had done at some point was I just built a dashboard for wireless monitoring, right? And essentially from there, it basically says, okay, here's your RF levels and here's whatever, right? Signal noise ratio for, what the hell is going on, whatever that is. But essentially, you can take that and then, because I do believe there is a Grafana integration and a integration for
Influx.
Because
there is like an InfluxDB sensor that's like, I think you can write a query for Influx and it can build a sensor in Home Assistant for.
Yeah, but it needs to be two-way. I'd have to think about. Yeah, maybe what I really just need to do is find a computer science student who needs a senior design project and
exactly
make a real integration instead of
and then put it on GitHub and open source it for everyone to use.
Totally.
Yeah.
If there's anybody listening, I will that needs a senior design project or whatever. I'd be happy to be a virtual advisor.
There you go. It's great, right? It's kind of a two-way street, right? It helps you out, it helps them out. So I think it's a great opportunity. So there you go. Fresh opportunity. You heard it here first. But yeah. So that's something I've seen. But again, like you said, that my thing was more of a one-way, more just a dashboard that I built, right? But and actually that didn't even go through Home Assistant, but I'm just saying you could use Home Assistant to tap in.
Yeah. Well, once it would be an Influx, it'd be easy to shift it over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The other thing you could do is you could use Home Assistant as an automation engine where it, kind of does a hybrid of both. So pulls the data from Influx and then runs commands via the Python API that you said. But then the cool thing is because it's an Influx, you can actually build some really neat dashboards around it with Grafana.
Yeah.
Right. I saw the dashboard you've built in Home Assistant. It actually looks pretty cool. But Grafana is a tool built for dashboarding in this case, right? So it might be kind of cool. Not to say that what you have isn't working. I think but that's the other thing, right? It's what Phil said: is if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, it's limping.
Fair.
It does the things that I needed to do right now well enough. That it was easier to do it this way than else. But there's a whole lot of other cool stuff that I would love for it to be able to do. But just like it's hard to find Home Assistant time in our free time lives, it's hard to find Home Assistant time in work time life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so is there any other stuff that is being done with your little coronavirus testing system that you got? So you got like notifications, you've got a dashboard for your sequencing, you've got automation set up. Like, is there anything else that it does?
I think right now that's probably it. There might be some way to do to actually like read in the results of the sequencing, like of the actual identification that I'm doing.
Nice. Yep.
And say, okay, barcode 1 came from a patient who definitely has the Delta variant.
Yeah.
Barcode 2
and then you could
came
send
from
like
a patient.
an alert, right? Like Delta is
Yeah.
detected, code red.
Send a notification to the school.
I report my results to somebody who reports to their results. Because by the time I get them, they're just strings of numbers to me, right?
Yeah.
I can't associate these with individuals. I can't even really associate them with what exact time they were sampled, just because they come in batches.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, to some extent is how it should be, right? You shouldn't need to know that this came from person A.
Correct. Because while I am looking for COVID DNA, I do occasionally get human in that mix as well, and so we do as much as we can to sort of protect
that's interesting.
those privacies.
Yeah, which is admirable. It's good.
Just like you think about with data, right? Don't collect data you don't need because it might leak, right?
Yeah.
And then
that's a fair point.
And then it's your problem because why did you have this birth date associated with this or something like that?
And well, I'm thinking too. What might be pretty cool is, again, even though you don't really necessarily need any of that data, so because some of what you're doing is does sample A match with known variant or the original COVID or whatever, I don't know how it's called. I'm clearly not in science. And just have some kind of matching there that's automated as well, right? So whether that's you're using some kind of machine learning or whether it's a lot simpler than that, and you just say, does this equal this, right?
Well, that's what the analysis that Home Assistant is sort of automating. Is this sort of, it takes all these reads, it aligns them to a genome, it tells where they're different, it uses machine learning tricks to then say, like, these are changes that are associated with a particular variant. So like that happens behind the scenes. I just don't re-render that back to Home Assistant because I just sort of send that off to the diagnostics team and they take it.
Interesting.
So what's on your roadmap then? Like what future plans do you want to improve with?
I use it for COVID, but also for other other science stuff, and just making it a little bit more flexible in how, when I do COVID screens, I need this information. When I do other experiments, I may need different information. So having some sort of like multiple dashboard system that I can switch between and say, okay, when I'm doing this experiment, I need this data, so it's in front of me. When I'm doing this other experiment, I need other information, have that in front of me, and then just, switching between.
Okay, that's cool. Do you do many other experiments apart from COVID at the moment, though?
Okay. So I also work on HIV is my other main sort of research area. I study how, as patients age with HIV, right, our medications allow them to live longer. They get neurocognitive decline more rapidly than people who don't have HIV. I study how the virus that they're infected with may be making some patients progress worse than others.
Interesting.
That's cool. And do you use the same technologies for that?
Yeah. So we HIV, we just read it on the same sequencer. Then we have a collection of patients that we do neuropsychological tests on, to see are they declining as they age, and then we just try to match all the people who are declining faster. Their virus looks like this, or all the people who are declining slower, their virus looks like this.
Interesting. That's actually pretty cool. And I guess that kind of works kind of across the board. I mean, I know your focus, as you said, is on COVID and HIV, but no matter what it is, really, it's kind of templatizable almost, right? In terms of the process.
Yeah, we do like there's a whole, I would call it bioinformatics.
Sure.
There's like a whole field of biology that tries to look at, you have one genome or you have like differences, and how are those differences associated with disease?
Right.
And this is sort of a generic technology that allows you to measure what those differences are. And then you combine that with other data to understand, do those differences mean anything?
Right. That's really cool.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet.
So what made you, like, I guess, this is a chicken and egg question. So did you start using Home Assistant for, your work, or were you using Home Assistant first at home and then you sort of found a use case to bring it back into your work?
I started Home Assistant at home. I was in the pre-Lovelace time.
Nice.
I remember spending 2 weeks getting my views right.
Yeah, and putting everything into the right groups and putting it.
Yeah. And then 2 weeks later, Lovelace comes out. I'm like,
yep.
Yeah.
That inevitably happens every time. Like it's the same thing happened to me, and it's whatever. But it's that's awesome. So how long have you been using it then?
.86, I think.
Nice.
Okay. So just before Lovelace.
Yeah, I think just before Lovelace. So is that? How old are we now? 6 years? 4 years?
Gosh, I don't know. Yeah, something like that. Well, I mean, the podcast is what, 4 years? We just almost
okay,
4.
So we'll say 3-ish, 3 or 4.
Okay, that's pretty good.
that general vicinity. And
0.86 was when Lovelace came out, and that was January 2019.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there you go.
We're not that old.
We're not that
old. Yeah. So I, my science career, I guess, has always been in the sort of merging of computers and biology.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, that was all about, making graphs off of the pedometer data or something like that.
Sure.
Like, oh, look, I walk more on Thursday than on Friday. And why? I don't know, but I have a graph. It's cool. And then Home Assistant was this way that I could make a graph of anything that I could get into Home Assistant. And then that was it. And then I was hooked.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So what are you doing around the house then? Like, have you got what's your coolest automations that you're running?
I think like everybody else who got stuck in lockdown, we all made meeting automations to turn off the dehumidifier, to adjust the lights, to tell other people that were on the phone. So I used somebody's, there's a Zoom integration in Hacks that you can make like a Zoom app that it talks to and gives you like a presence. So I just did it off of that.
Nice.
I just installed some Ring cameras. I've been playing around with some of the image processing stuff because I do that type of deep learning as part of my research.
Rohan's been doing a lot with delivery drivers.
I knew this was going to come up.
Rohan, so if you need some notes, just ask Rohan.
You definitely don't want to do that.
This might be that I have some of my boxes are already set up for machine learning type stuff. So I was able to get like Ring Mqtt up on a Docker, and then Dudes had a Docker that was relatively easy to install.
What's Ring Mqtt?
It's there's a Hass.io add-on for mapping Ring cameras and integrations to an MQTT device. And then I'm on Docker, so they actually have also a regular old Docker container.
Nice.
So I just
Right.
Docker pull, and it does a two-factor with you. And then it'll let you do snapshots from Ring.
Oh, okay.
And then direct object detection, dudes, or whatever is Home Assistant integration. They also have a Docker hub.
Interesting. Yeah, because I was going to ask about dudes. I know you mentioned that. So,
what does dudes do?
It's a Docker that runs TensorFlow.
Okay.
So
that's where I've heard it from.
It makes a tiny gRPC server. So although I think Home Assistant, it also has a REST API that I think Home Assistant uses.
Yeah.
So whenever you run image processing.scan, it sends a feed from the camera that goes through its deep learning magic. And then it gives you a box with a car, around all the cars or something like that. Cool. And then exposes that data as like an attribute of the object.
Right. So if someone was to put a box around like a delivery van or delivery driver, they'll be able to get that into Home Assistant. Especially if they were
exactly.
and their name was Rohan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like it. No, this is cool. So, I have a Ring cameras, but there's obviously the native Ring integration with Home Assistant. So I don't know what Ring MQTT would do better.
Yeah, I wasn't able to get it to actually save videos. It might just be that I don't have it set up right. That might also be the problem. But
because I find there's like an attribute, the last snapshot or whatever comes in from the Ring, like as an attribute to the camera. And then I think I used the file downloader in Home Assistant to just pull in that video, save it, and then ship it off to my NAS for long-term storage.
Yeah, for whatever reason, when I took the same automation, we probably copy pasted it from the same place on the Home Assistant documentation, and mine gives me a 403 forbidden response in my logs.
Nice.
And
have you got Ring Premium? Like, have you paying the subscription?
I just got it. I'm on the 30-day trial thing, so that might be.
I think that is the thing.
That might be
you have to pay for it to get access to the recordings. Which is why the cloud sucks, right?
The Ring MQTT allows you to do snapshots. And apparently without paying for it, because I haven't given them a credit card yet.
Nice.
So, I don't know. I'll see if I can make that work, or I'll pay however much.
Well, I mean, if you can do it for free, then there's nothing wrong with that.
But I think it's I assume it's still coming from the cloud. I don't think it's a local thing anyway. I think
don't
it's
believe
just,
it is.
Yeah, especially if you're not. I think because Ring doesn't use or particularly their battery ones, they don't use any of the standard video protocols, right? So you can't put it into a NAS or something, or a surveillance station, or
there's no like RSTP or
that's the one
RTSP or whatever.
So what about any other automations? Any automations for your feline friends would be interesting?
I've been I made some ESP home cat feeders that work most of the time, I think is the way to describe it. The cats are very persistent when they don't work.
You will know.
But I found somebody on GitHub had an ESP home cat feeder. I just sort of Googled it. And it uses a servo and one of those like cereal dispensers.
Yeah, I was just thinking like cornflakes kind of thing at the hotels or whatever.
Exactly what it is. So I made a ESP home servo controller. And did some soldering, and it turns. My problem right now has been as the servo turns, sometimes it strips the connection with the part that actually needs to turn.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to convince one of my friends with a 3D printer to 3D print me a correct joiner thingamajigger.
Yeah.
So that
which is the official term that they are called.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Mount maybe. I don't know.
Okay, that's cool. So what sort of automation schedule would you have that on though? Like, do they get fed twice a day or something? Or
so what I did, the GitHub repo connects it to a Node-RED and then has Node-RED do it. I don't trust that my Home Assistant will stay on consistently, so I actually used ESP Home. They have an automation system for they've just like Home Assistant now. They're merging more and more as we see. So I just have it go off every 2 hours. It's just a small amount every 2 hours, and then there's a button so that you can. So that when they bug you enough, you can push the button. And I can call to Google Home I have upstairs and say, feed the animals, and they both go off.
I think there's an integration with the Home Assistant, there's an automated kitty litter thing that's now integrated into Home Assistant. There's something that you'll have to buy now. Just added to your shopping list for
That's
you.
right. Or make.
So I have those automatic kitty litter cleaners. That a previous version of my Home Assistant had hook up to TP links. And then I just monitored the energy output to know whether it was you could tell when a cat was in it because it would start blinking or whatever, and I guess that made the usage go up just a little bit. And then when it would start cleaning, it would go up even more, and then you could tell that. And I just made a state controller in Home Assistant, just like an input select that got switched back and forth. And then those TP links got moved to other more important projects. And knowing when it would only observe, so it wasn't all that. It wasn't all as helpful.
You still had to go in and finish up.
Push the button again. But I did learn that our cats tend to go to the bathroom almost twice as often when we're out of the house as when we're in the house. So when we go on vacation, they'll run almost twice as many times as when we're we're here.
That's funny. I don't know if maybe it's an anxiety thing or something like that, or just or maybe they're like, oh man, I'm finally free.
But what I learned from that was to make sure to always clean the litter. Even if I'm only going for 3 days, the litter may last for 7. If they're using it twice as often, then I know I need to be at least a little bit more ahead. So observing things is always interesting.
That's right. You really are all about the data.
Yeah. We all have a million projects in our heads, and at some point they may be in the home.
Mine involves FedEx and UPS and so on, and image processing. That's been going on for a year now, something like that, which I haven't even looked at in the last year. So,
I'll say the image processing stuff has gotten easier lately. As you come back to it, it might be easier than it was when you thought.
Yeah, it was, I think I may have mentioned on the show, but I don't know, maybe it was just Phil and I talking, but I was, for a customer of mine, they were actually because part of the portfolio that I cover includes security cameras. And they were like, hey, we want to be able to blur out people's faces and things like that. And honestly, real time with a pretty quick script that I literally found I literally saw some guy on YouTube being like, this is how you do it. I'm like, okay. And I pretty much copied that. And it's like, boom, now all of a sudden I can dynamically blur out faces. And, I tried it on my webcam and I tried it on my actual camera and it works great. And it's just you're tilting your head back and forth and you just have this blur box that just kind of follows you, right? Which is pretty cool. It's so true though. It's the bar to start has gotten so much lower than even from when I first looked at it and I mentioned it on the show, right? Like, but yeah, it has. I really should pick it up again, but time.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Will,
awesome.
Thank you so much for talking to us today, and awesome use case for Home Assistant. Love the way that Home Assistant is being used to just help you out sequencing all that data coming in, right? Like, does its job instead of having to write a Python script. You just found Home Assistant's already written in Python, and Home Assistant's a great automation engine, and it just goes to show how versatile Home Assistant is. So, I think great use case for it.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me on the chat.
Thanks, man.
No, thanks so much for coming on.
Cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
If you want to share your Home Assistant journey or come on as a guest, reach out to us at feedback@hasspodcast.io. That's HASS podcast.io.
The Home Assistant podcast is hosted by Phil Hawthorne and myself, Rohan Karamandi. For links to topics we discussed today, check out our show notes on hasspodcast.io.